After my last video on Pathologic, I said I was going to take a break from the game. However, people have been so responsive to this last video that I decided to relent and give the people what they want. I'm a slave to the algorithm, after all. And what they want, what they've been clamoring for, is obviously the answer to one of the biggest questions vexing the Pathologic community. If you were to hypothetically host a potluck and invited all of the main characters of Pathologic to your potluck party, what dish would each of them bring? For those of you who aren't American, I'm not entirely sure whether you know what a potluck is. Basically, it's an event where everyone brings a dish of food to share. Now, before I get started, obviously all of the answers here would be different if you were playing Pathologic in its original Russian form, because the characters would be bringing Russian food. But because I'm not that familiar with Russian cuisine and would only be able to speculate poorly about our characters' Cossack cuisine concoctions. Yes, I know that not all Russians are Cossacks, but dang it, it was a great alliteration. Let's assume I'm playing the 2005 version of Pathologic with the janky English translation, so everyone is bringing American foods for some reason. Yeah, see, sure, I've justified this. Let's start with the Canes! The Canes all arrive as a group a full hour and a half after the party has already started. They mostly stand around in the corner talking to themselves, but at least they present some mostly decent offerings. Victor brings a salad, like this sprouted quinoa with marinated vegetables dish you see here. It's obviously healthy, but also surprisingly delicious. When you go back for seconds, you ask Victor about it, and he says this was one of Nina's favorite dishes. He'll share the recipe with you if you stop by sometime. Georgi brings something more basic, a potato salad, but a hot German potato salad, not one of those cold potato salads made with mayonnaise and hard-boiled eggs and such. That is too unhealthy and, frankly, too common for him. You are again surprised at how good it is. He shrugs when you question him about the dish, noting that he realizes such foods are popular amongst the ordinary folks of the town. But when you press him a bit more, he admits that he actually does enjoy cooking it. There is an order to the following of a recipe that he finds quite pleasant. Maria's dish is a bit of a different story. She brings a red velvet cake. It seems, however, that she didn't quite know how to bake it right. It's a little overcooked and the frosting is a bit lumpy. It's not terrible by any means, but it's clear she made a few guesses as she went along and refused to ask for help. You eat some of it, obviously, because you're a bit terrified of Maria's response if you don't, but the only person who seems to truly enjoy it is her father, Victor. The Stomatin brothers also arrive late, even later than the Canes. Andrei clearly forgot that the party was happening until Peter came over to say, "Hey, I'm ready, let's go." As such, Andrei quite predictably brings some bottles of Tweering. It's not even the good stuff either, it's just some bottom shelf Tweering he grabbed from the pub as he was running out the door. Peter also presents a Tweering-related item, though he at least put more thought into his offering. Specifically, Peter made some sort of Tweering cake concoction. You think that he was trying to make a Tweering version of a rum cake, but what he produced is basically inedible. He seems quite proud of it, though, and you suppose that's all that matters. You're honestly mostly just happy that he got out of the bathtub to talk with people. Eva brings a type of cookie that she found in the back of one of her cookbooks, about foods of the world. I know I can't pronounce the name accurately, so I'm going to point to this lovely woman here.
Today I'm making Persian cookies. They are also known as kulche.
You're not sure how accurate they are to the real thing, but they at least taste good. No lie though, these cookies sound delicious and I think I'm going to have to try making them. Big Vlad brings an apple pie that he just bought at a brand-name grocery store. If asked about it, he shrugs and says that he had better things to waste his time on than preparing for the silly community gathering. Vlad the Younger, get this, brings the exact same brand-name grocery store apple pie, but he's taken it out of the box and put it onto a platter. When you point this out, he acts like he baked it himself. And you're like, My man, no, you obviously didn't. It's fine that you bought a pie, but don't pretend that you baked it. Eventually, he sighs and says, yes, whatever, he obviously bought the pie, but it was his idea to sprinkle the cinnamon and sugar on top, as if that's all that's required to claim ownership of making it. You walk away before you can roll your eyes too obviously. Capella, also brought apple pie. Yeah, it turns out that the Olgimskis, without talking to each other at all brought apple pies. She seems a bit embarrassed by that, but the difference is that Capella actually made her pie. You can tell she's a bit self-conscious about how it turned out, and it's true that the crust is a little lumpy in places, but it tastes delicious. It takes a bit of convincing for her to believe you're being genuine about that, but when she does, she is obviously relieved that it's good. She also says that this was her mother's recipe. Victoria loved making pies like this to bring to parties. Laura also brings a dessert, and you're starting to realize you really should have assigned different people to bring different types of food, because you're ending up with quite a dessert spread and very little actual dinner food. But it's too late to change the past now. And you honestly can't really complain, because Laura brought a friggin' chocolate souffle, and it's delicious. It's one of the best gosh darn things you've eaten in a while. Laura also arrives early to help set up for the party, which is incredibly sweet of her. Yulia, fortunately, predicted that there would be far too many desserts at this party and brings along a few chicken pot pies. She didn't make them herself. She put in a specialty order ahead of time with the couple that runs a hole-in-the-wall restaurant, and clearly she did her research well because they are absolutely divine. Anna brings some sort of jello dish with a hue to it that, even for jello, seems a tad too fluorescent. When you ask her about her dish, she mentions something about the healing properties of essential oils, and at that point you nope right out of trying it. Ruben brings a tray of baked ziti, and he keeps apologizing for it like he's brought something cheap and substandard. It's neither of those things, but no matter how many times you tell him that, it doesn't quite seem to get through to him that you actually mean it. Bad Grief brings a kind of cheese that you've never heard of and can't pronounce. It's delicious, though. When you have a free moment, he asks whether you'd like to purchase some more from him, as it's the kind of thing that can't exactly be bought at your corner grocery, if you catch his drift. You know it would be a bad idea to do so, but you're honestly tempted because it's that good. Obviously, no one expected the children to bring anything, but Taya apparently insisted that they needed something to share. So between them, Taya, Sticky, Notkin, Murky, and Grace cobbled together a bunch of nuts to make a weird trail mix thing? It was a nice effort on their part. Khan just watches them like they're a bunch of idiots. We're kids. All we have to do is show up. I can't believe my dad dragged me to this. You hear him mutter under his breath. Katerina brings a beef stroganoff to the event. Given Katerina's penchant for being slightly out of things, it's surprisingly well made, even if the beef is a bit dry. Though, predictably, Katerina spends most of the party standing by the wall with eyes half glazed over. When you ask Alexander Sabarov what he's brought, he points to the beef stroganoff, and you eye him skeptically until he insists that he helped make it. You point out that everyone else has brought their own dish, and at that point he walks away with an irritable twist to his step, saying something about how, "I shouldn't be subjected to this sort of criticism. I'm the governor after all, don't you know?" He wanders over to the wall where Katerina is and doesn't budge. Aspity shows up with what she claims is a vegetable platter, but which is in reality just some wild root vegetables she clearly dug up from the step and still have, like, clumps of dirt on them. She becomes irritated with you when you tell her that usually people bringing a vegetable platter, wash their vegetables, cut off the leafy green part, maybe bring a dip, that sort of thing. She rolls her eyes at you exaggeratedly, but she eventually leaves and comes back and, well, at least the dirt is gone. You're wondering whether you should say anything else when Clara prances over, grabs a carrot, proclaims it delicious, and Aspity smugly smiles at you like, "See, you know nothing." At this point, you decide that this is simply not worth your time and eat another slice of pot pie. Oyun brings a plate of steak tartare. Steak tartare, if you don't know, is basically a patty of raw minced beef. You immediately try to explain to him that this is literally an unsafe dish to eat, and you're not going to let him give everyone food poisoning. He goes, "Psh, I ate this all the time growing up, and I was fine." You again try to explain what E. coli is, and why this is not something he can bring to a potluck, but he ignores you and puts it on the table anyways. Fortunately, he's also the only one who eats it. Alexander Block shows up with a large pot of something that is still faintly simmering. He explains that this is a stew that can easily be made from canned goods, something he learned to throw together in the army. It's not too bad, though it's a little salty. Aglaia Lilich clearly only came because she heard that Artemy would be there. You see her glancing around the room as she arrives, and when she notices that the Harrispex is not yet there, she pulls out a book and begins reading in a corner. Still, she brings a frittata that looks oddly fancy, though she insists it is incredibly easy to make. And speaking of Artemy, of course our main protagonists are at this party. Artemy shows up late, but he also brings a plate of raw steaks and, weirdly, his own grill, and cooks them right at the party. I mean, they're delicious, but when you ask him where all the meat came from, he merely shrugs and says that Mother Bodo provided. You have no idea what that means, and debate asking him again, but decide it's better if you don't know. Daniil brings these ranch cucumber bites that seem to be made with an unnecessary amount of effort. I mean, look at these, the cream cheese is literally piped on top of the cucumbers. Daniil claims it was very simple to make, but you're still skeptical. Also, you end up eating most of them because you watch the other guests picking around his offering. You suspect that these cucumber bites are perhaps a tad too fancy for most of the guests at the party, and you don't want him to feel bad. Claire brings a bowl of what appears to be a sugary concoction of her own making. Some cereal, some butter, some chocolate, some peanut butter, some sprinkles, some pretzels, and that's just what you can personally identify. Like puppy chow, but decidedly odder. You initially resolve that it's probably safer not to try it, but at some point, you're not entirely sure how, you find yourself trapped in a corner with Claire in front of you, insisting you take a bite, saying that it will help your troubled soul. You tentatively eat a few pieces to get her off your back. It doesn't taste quite as sickly sugary as you initially expected, but you also don't go back for more. Some of the other guests rave about it, however. It's weird, too, because you could have sworn she only brought one bowl, but at some point you look over at the table and there are definitely two. Oh, and Mark is also here. He brings a dish of what you think are crab cakes. They're quite good, so you ask him for the recipe or to let you know where he bought them from. Mark just kind of gives a laugh and says, "The recipe. It's such an interesting conundrum navigating the paths between the state you were in and the state you are to become. And who is to say the becoming is even the final state?" You stare at him until it becomes clear that he isn't going to say anything else, at which point you add, "Okay, but I asked you a question and I was kind of hoping for an answer." Mark replies, "Yes, you asked a question and I gave you an answer." You stare at him some more. Yeah, maybe an answer to a question, but I was hoping you would give me an answer to the question I actually asked." "I see," he says. "Then what is the question you wish an answer to?" More staring on your part before you conclude, "You know what? Never mind." And as you walk off, you swear you hear him say, "What an interesting script this one has." A few hours into the party, you spot a dish on the table and you're puzzled because you swear you didn't see anyone bring it in. It's a tray of neat brown squares. They look like brownies, but something inside you tells you they are not. As you glance around, frowning, you think you see the swish of a tiny coat around the corner, and you have a sinking feeling you know exactly where these came from. You take the tray and dump it straight into the garbage out of precaution. But then, about a half hour later, you spot the exact same tray on the table right where it was before. Another glancing around on your part, and this time you meet a pair of eyes watching you from across the room. Eyes belonging to a figure no larger than a child. Yes, suspicion confirmed. You sigh loudly, then grab a glass and begin to clink it. "Excuse me," you yell as the partygoers begin to look at you. "Yeah, sorry about the interruption, but nobody eat these, okay? They might be fine, but they could also be rat poison." "Okay, fine. Thank you. Continue." You see this last bit with a glare to the pair of eyes while you ignore the confused looks from the actually invited guests. Those eyes watch you expressionless before disappearing the next time you blink. Not long after this incident, you finish a conversation and turn to see two more uninvited partygoers. A boy with hair that is nearly black, and a girl in a pinafore with blonde locks falling past her shoulders. "We brought these," she says, holding a plate up for your inspection. You frown as you look down to see the surface covered with what appear to be lumps of sand. The pieces click together as you turn back to the girl, feeling another sigh building in your chest. At that moment, Eva walks over and exclaims, "Oh, what lovely cupcakes," as the girl beams at her. You feel that sigh escape you, and as it does, a low voice by your side says, "You see them too." You turn to see Aglaia standing next to you. "Yes, should we tell them?" you say, nodding to the people starting to gather around the two children. "No," she replies. "I find it's best to simply let them believe what they're meant to. Besides, I don't think telling them would make any difference. They wouldn't be able to see what's really before them." The afternoon wanes into evening, and everyone seems to be having a good time when you suddenly sense an odd presence behind you. You look around, irritated by what you're assuming are yet more uninvited guests, to see a tragedian and an executor. "You seem to be enjoying yourself," the executor remarks. "Yes," you reply, and then you reluctantly add, "Do you two have some weird dish to share? A hamburger made of sticks and leaves, perhaps?" The executor chuckles at that, the sound a low rumble behind the mask. "We are not here to participate," he explains, "merely to observe." "Aha," you reply, standing here silently watching everyone. "Yeah, that's not creepy at all." "If it helps, we did prepare the party," the tragedian offers. You frown at him, but you think back to earlier in the day. You did arrive to find the tables already set up, the decorations out and ready. You had figured that Laura had done it since she'd somehow arrived even before you. But now that you think about it, it would have been a lot of work for one person to do in that time. "Oh," you reply. "Well, thank you, then." "Of course," the executor says, with a slight bow of his head. "Though there is one thing you could do for us in return." "The answer to a simple question," the tragedian adds. "The only one that really matters," concludes the executor. "Okay," you say, suddenly unsure. "And that is?" The executor leans forward, his manner suggesting that you are about to engage in the exchange of an important secret. "What did you bring to the potluck?" So, I don't know about you, dear viewer, but I brought these snickerdoodles here. They are quite easy to make, but people always seem to really enjoy them when I bring them to things. Oh, and in case you live in a place where cream of tartar is hard to find, I couldn't find it, for example, when I studied abroad in Sweden, you can kind of fudge it by substituting baking powder for the baking soda, since baking powder has cream of tartar in it. Just remember you have to triple the amount of baking powder. The executor pulls back as you finish answering his question. "I see," he says. "Quite interesting." "Indeed," the tragedian agrees. "Enjoy the party," he adds. You turn once again to the partygoers, and when you glance back, you see that the two of them are gone. Not entirely gone, though. Now that you're looking for them, you see that they have simply returned to a shadowed staircase near the door, from which they've probably been watching you all this time. It's a bit weird, but you suppose it's okay. They did set up a nice party after all. And there you have it, what each of the characters of Pathologic would bring to a potluck party. Tell me in the comments, dear viewers, what dish you have brought to the party. Also, recipes for most of the dishes I discussed are in the description. I haven't made most of these recipes personally though, so I can't actually vouch for whether they are good or not. And with that, I think I'm done. I've now answered the most pressing pathologic question of them all. What more pathologic discourse is there even to be had? Great, we no longer have to discuss this game again, ever. Congratulations to everyone in the fandom, we did it! We solved Pathologic! Oh, and on a completely unrelated note, happy April 1st. Okay, bye everyone. Bye.